Hey guys, all right, so it's Thursday afternoon and I'm making this video for you. You are gonna get the chance to see this Friday morning in class. This is continuing some of our conversation around God the Son. And the question that we left off with was, is there a space where we can see God the Son in the texts of the Old Testament or the First Testament before we meet him in the Incarnation? So what I'm going to do is use my Bible app. Okay, this is the Olive Tree Bible app that you can see on the screen now. And this is, you've got this on the iPad, by the way, and so you've got access to this particular app. But this will help us as we want to look at some of this text. So I'm going to highlight some things. I'm looking at my screen, and so if I'm looking up and away from the camera or something like that, I'm trying to look at the screen and navigate what I've got going on here. But we're going to look at some texts together and consider a character that we see in Genesis 16 for the first time, and it's this character right here, the angel of the Lord. Okay? So, Sarai and Hagar are in the middle of a conflict, and Hagar becomes pregnant, and she's going to have Ishmael, and Sarah's not a fan, and so she drives Hagar away, and Hagar flees into the wilderness, and verse 7 is where this picks up, and it says, "The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness." The spring that's on the way to Shur. And he said to Hagar, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from my mistress. And the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for a multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant, you will bear a son, and call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. And then it goes on to explain the kind of person that Ishmael will be. But in verse 13, so she called the name of the Lord, and that right there, in all caps, is an indication that the word being used here is Yahweh. She called the name of Yahweh, the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. Okay, or a God who sees me. She said, truly here I have seen him who looks after me. So Hagar is under the impression that she's had an encounter with God. That she's had an encounter with God. She believes that she has seen the Lord. And it is the Lord who has spoken to her. But we have been told by the narrator that the angel of the Lord who has visited her. And he's the one who's talked to her. And he's made her promises. And he speaks on God's behalf, giving her instructions, making her a promise about Ishmael, telling her that the Lord has listened to her affliction. But nowhere do we see the Lord prompting the conversation from the angel of the Lord. Okay? Second, this particular formulation, the angel of the Lord, is a particular sort of grammatical formulation. Okay, and we'll talk more about this in some other places or maybe on Tuesday, but it's a grammatical formulation that is unique for every time we see a character, or unique to the places where we see a character that acts like this character is acting in this story. So, the angel of the Lord appears and has these sort of characteristics that go with it. It speaks on God's behalf, often without any kind of prompting or without any kind of explanation that the angel of the Lord has been sent by Yahweh. It just shows up and speaks on God's behalf. In this instance, the kind of speech that we see seems characteristic of speech directly from God, promising a son, confirming her pregnancy, giving her instructions on what to do next, and making a promise to multiply that offspring. That's a promise that God himself made to Abraham. And so it's odd that that promise in chapter 16 is coming out of the mouth of the angel of the Lord. So we're trying to sort who it is that's speaking with her. It is the angel of the Lord who is present to her. Is he speaking on God's behalf? Or is there an identity buried in this character that might be God appearing to her? We can look at another text here in Genesis. We're going to go down to Genesis 22 because there's a significant mention in Genesis 22:15. If you're unfamiliar, Genesis 22 is the story of the almost sacrifice of Isaac, the testing of Abraham, and the binding of Isaac. So, Abraham is preparing to make this sacrifice of Isaac. He's got Isaac on the altar, the wood is laid for him, and the knife is raised. And in verse 11, actually, it's verse 11 that I want to pay attention to, and then verse 15. In verse 11, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven. So whoever our character is, it is speaking to Abraham, in this case, from the space where God is, this heaven, right? So wherever God is, the angel of the Lord is speaking to Abraham from heaven, and he calls to him, and he interrupts the sacrifice. And he tells Abraham not to lay his hand on the boy. Now, this one I think is really significant because we know from the beginning of the chapter, up here in verse 1, that God tested Abraham and said to him, okay? He said. Who said? Well, God said. So God has told Abraham to go and make this sacrifice of Isaac. But in verse 11, it's the angel of the Lord who interrupts it. What authority does the angel of the Lord have to interrupt what God has told Abraham to do? Well, he's either interrupting because God has told him to interrupt, and the narrator leaves out that detail of God telling the angel of the Lord to go and intervene, or the angel of the Lord interrupts because there's something unique about this character, and he might in fact be God appearing to Abraham. Now, the angel of the Lord stops and tells him, "Don't lay your hand on the boy. I know that you fear God because you've not withheld your son from me." That's the angel of the Lord speaking. And then Abraham sees the ram. Abraham then says, this is the place where the Lord will provide. And in verse 15, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven. And we get this speech. By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this. Now, this speech sounds more like what we hear from the prophets. And so now there's a question mark of, is this character, the angel of the Lord, speaking this second time, serving as a messenger of Yahweh? Or is this character the messenger who happens to be Yahweh at the same stroke? Well, this is kind of what we're wrestling out. We're going to go at least to one more place here and take a look at Exodus chapter 3, because Exodus 3 is an interesting start. And this is, I think, probably where we'll camp out for the rest of the time that we have as I do this with you. I want to make sure you've got some time to continue working and writing your material today. But here we go. Now, Moses is keeping the flock, and he is distracted because on the western side of the wilderness, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. Now this is important because the character who is present in the fire of the burning bush is the angel of the Lord. Verse 4. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush. So, whose voice is coming to Moses from within the burning bush? It's God's voice. That's verse 4. But the character that's present in the flames, in the bush, is the angel of the Lord. And that's where the identities of these characters gets really vague and interlocked, because now we're not sure which character we're looking at in the encounter with Moses, talking with Moses directly from the burning bush. Is it God? Or is it the angel of the Lord? Or is the answer some kind of yes? This is the conversation where God is going to reveal his name to Moses in verse 14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am, the Lord, the God of your fathers, has sent me to you. This is the name of God as he's going to be remembered throughout all generations. But we were told way up here in verses 2 and in verse 4 that God speaks to Moses from inside the burning bush. And the character who's there in the flames, in the burning bush, is the angel of the Lord. And so we're in a space where the character who's doing the acting and the talking is clearly identified as God. And it'll be God for the rest of the chapter, by the way. But the character that we've been told is present with Moses in the flames of fire, in the burning bush, that he's encountering in this moment, the character that's there is the angel of the Lord. And that leaves us in a space where we have to ask, is the angel of the Lord just a particularly special messenger that God sends to do messages on his behalf at strategic moments at really important times for really significant things or really important people, perhaps? Or is the angel of the Lord an appearance of God, and this is how they're describing it in the Bible? Because if it's an appearance of God, then we have to ask ourselves a question. Each of the times this angel appears, he seems to be doing something along the lines of delivering a message. Now, that's characteristic of what an angel is, because the word for angel just means messenger. But it is interesting to me and to a host of others who want to tease this out, that the primary function we see of the angel of the Lord is to deliver a message as speaking in the position of God. The angel of the Lord speaks in the position of the Lord. He doesn't often clarify that this is what the Lord is saying as distinct from what he is saying himself. And in Genesis 16, he just blanketly makes Hagar some promises that are a lot like the promises God makes Abraham. And so we're asking the question, is this God making promises? Or is it God telling the angel to make promises on his behalf? Because we don't see that backstory if that's what's going on. If this character primarily serves a messenger function, delivering words, then plenty of scholars have picked up on the idea that Jesus is called the Word, and argue that it makes a lot of sense that a character like the angel of the Lord, who narratively is confused or made intentionally ambiguous in presence with the presence of the Lord, God, that he would be a kind of messenger function if this is an appearance of Jesus before his incarnation, because Jesus is the Word. And so the words of the message to these individuals, Moses and Hagar and Abraham, come through the messenger, who is the Word. The First Testament text, the Old Testament, refers to that messenger as the angel of the Lord. And it's a unique grammatical formulation, and I said this earlier. You don't need the definite article in Hebrew quite like you need it in English in certain spaces. So if I wanted to say an angel of Yahweh, I could just say Malak Yahweh. Those are the two Hebrew words. Malak for messenger, and Yahweh, the name of God. But if I say Ha Malak Yahweh, that Ha in Hebrew is the definite article the, T-H-E. So an angel is just Malak Yahweh. And that phrase shows up in a whole host of places in the Old Testament. But this phrase, Ha Malak Yahweh, the angel of Yahweh, the angel of the Lord, only shows up in certain places. And every time he shows up, there's this weird telescoping. God is involved and the angel of the Lord is involved. God is talking and the angel of the Lord is present. The angel of the Lord is present and God is present. The angel of the Lord is talking, God is talking, they're both talking, they're interchangeable. There's this weird how they're mapped onto each other in some kind of way as they appear in these stories. And it's hard to distinguish between what God is doing and what the angel is doing. Because like here in Exodus 3, the angel of the Lord is in the flames of the bush. But it's God who speaks from inside that burning bush. Well, if the flames of fire are inside the bush, and the voice is coming from inside the bush, and the angel of the Lord is the one in the flame of the fire, in the bush, talking from inside the bush, then it makes sense that it's the angel of the Lord who's doing the talking. But the talking is attributed to God. And so it leaves us in a space where we have to ask some serious questions. Is this an appearance of God that is an appearance of the Son before the Son's incarnation, Jesus Christ? Is this God showing up as God the Son? Is this God the Son appearing to deliver these messages, to make these promises, to act and interact with his people? It's a valid question. There's a couple other spaces, and I'll just paraphrase them for you. We don't necessarily have to go and look, although I'll probably take you just to the chapters just to keep us sort of squared away here. Exodus 14 talks to us about the departure from Egypt. And in that departure from Egypt, we know that the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire lead Israel forward. And so in verse 19, the angel of God who was going before the host of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. And coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel, there was a cloud and darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. Now, I think without one coming near the other all night, which one and which other is one of the primary interpretive questions here. If we're talking about the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, because we know the pillar of fire is involved already. Okay, it mentions it up in here. But down here, the angel of God who is going before the host of Israel, which would be where the pillar of fire is. The pillar of fire moves and goes behind them. But in verse 19, it's the angel of God who was going before them and now has moved behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved. So now I've got the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud. I've got the angel of God and the pillar of cloud, something to that effect. And the two don't come near each other. They're distinct. But anytime we talk about who led the nation of Israel with pillar of fire and pillar of cloud, it's always, well, it was God. Well, what does that mean for the angel of God here? Is that the angel of God appearing? I want to look at one other space, and if memory serves, it's here in Exodus 22, but I could be wrong. Nope. So we are going to use the wonders of the internet, and we're going to look that up really quickly because I want to look at one more place. Where we see this, it is 23:21. Okay, I just needed to scroll down a little further. Here we go. Conquest of Canaan promise. This is Exodus 23. And in this section, God says to Moses and the Israelites, he says, "Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way." Notice it's an angel. Okay? "Bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him." Okay? "For he will not pardon your transgression." Now, it's interesting. Angels don't pardon transgression. God does. And then this last piece. "My name is in him." So, God in the Old Testament has a track record of interacting with people like Abraham and Moses and some of these other significant individuals on the basis of the interaction being somehow connected to the angel of the Lord. And here, God tells Moses specifically he's going to send an angel before the nation of Israel to lead them on their way and to bring them into the place that has been prepared for them, the promised land. And God tells them to be careful, to listen to his voice and obey him, not to rebel against him. Because if they do, then the angel won't pardon their sin. Forgiving and pardoning sin is something that belongs to God alone. And so if the angel is the one doing the pardoning of sin, God has either delegated it to him in a kind of special way, or the angel is God, appearing to them in a way that they describe as, quote, the angel of the Lord, perhaps. And he goes one step further. "My name is in him." There have been a whole host of Christians who have made a case that the angel of the Lord may very well be Jesus Christ. And they come here to Exodus 23:21, and they use this as a space to make that case. The name Jesus, in Hebrew it's Yeshua, means Yahweh saves. Is that what he means when he says, "My name is in him"? Maybe. It might be that the name of God is in him because the angel of the Lord is God, appearing and delivering messages to certain individuals at certain times in the run of the biblical narrative. We can debrief this on Tuesday when we get together. Okay? I hope this has been helpful in some sense. I know it's probably a little bit confusing. There's a whole host of questions and things running through your head. So jot those things down. Let's make sure we debrief this on Tuesday. Okay? Enjoy your 3-day weekend, right? And I will see you on Tuesday.